Hoffschmidt, founder and CEO of Alpha Sophia, and this week I'm joined by Mark Copeland. Mark, you're VP of Sales at 3T Medical System and more commonly known as the Value Analysis Whisperer. If you follow Mark on LinkedIn, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me as a guest.
Yeah, great. So let's just start right in. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey.
Yeah, I'm a 27-year medical sales professional. 20 of the last have been in med device. I was in pharma, I was in biotech, and then I've been in med device for the past 20, mostly, but not solely, in and around operating rooms, but more the perioperative services space. But I've sold, and we've sold things into emergency departments, ICUs, NICUs, and ambulatory surgery centers and hospitals and health systems, however you choose to define those. So I'm in sales for all 20 years of med device. It's always been with startups. Some became big and are not startups anymore, but all of them were early startup, early med device companies. So that's just sort of where I've been.
Yeah, that's quite a journey you've been on. You mentioned that you started in biotech and pharma and then moved over to MedTech. What got you interested in medical device sales, and how does it differ from pharma and biotech?
Yeah, it was. I loved pharma and biotech. I was presenting basically pills to doctors, right? And it was really interesting, and it was very deep and very required a lot of understanding and knowledge. But I always thought the service part of med device, specifically, I was looking at going into implants, right? And I ended up getting in with Globus Medical, which was a startup spine company now. And I think they're the number 2 spine company in the world now, but they were a startup in 2005. But the part of the operating room and surgery did 2 things. I found it interesting that like you were part of a team, a service, with the cases. And I'm as you can tell, I'm an old basketball player. That appealed to me. Basketball likes to be small groups of people working collaboratively together, right? And so the service part of being part of that team just kind of had an allure. And I decided I wanted to get into it, and sort of got into it a little bit later in life. I didn't get into it until I was about 33 or 34 years old. And it's been great. But I liked pharma and bio, but there was sort of a service and collaboration component of med device that was very appealing that you really didn't have as much of in pharma and biotech at the time. Yeah. So yeah, that was it.
And my understanding is also in med device, in sales, you're usually much closer to the product and to the technology, because you are the advisor to the clinical personnel, to the admin staff at the hospital who are doing the procurement, often joining in procedures, in surgeries, and advising the surgeon on how to use the product. Is that also something?
And vice versa. If something wasn't working well, you were the first one to know. Yeah. So like that's true. You'd get immediate feedback, as opposed to if I was selling a prescription drug, and a doctor would say, "Hey, I'm going to start using that in these types of patients." I might not hear about the results for months, if at all. You would try to stay close and follow up, and how are they doing? How many patients have you done? But you weren't as close as you are, generally speaking, particularly in the implant world, as you were in the implant world. Like we'd walk out of the room and we'd know how the product went, which is different. Yeah.
Let's maybe move to something. I already mentioned in my intro. You're known by the name the Value Analysis Whisperer. That's everyone from the audience following Mark on LinkedIn. If you're not doing already, do that. It's just great content, but also a lot of fun following you. I think. I really like your long form LinkedIn posts where you are playing through scenarios you've probably witnessed yourself or which could have happened in the clinical world in interactions between sales and clinical staff. What does the name mean, and how did you get that name?
Well, it was given to me by a surgeon friend who wanted a new product that my company had, and he wasn't sure how to get it approved. And this is when value analysis committees were starting to become prevalent. So the surgeon friend of mine wanted a new product, and he used to just say whatever he wanted, and he got it. And the ground had shifted under our feet, and there was a committee in another building down across town at this time who would approve things, and he didn't understand why. And I happened to at that point. I'd done my work, and I was like, "Do you want this product?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Okay, here's what we're going to do. First of all, you're not going to do anything. Okay, I'm going to go do all this. I'm going to go do some data collection. I'm going to do a business analysis, and I'm going to come back and tell you what we're going to do. And under no circumstances are you to do anything until I tell you what we're going to do. But if the health system calls and says, hey, I know you want Cope's product. Do you really want it? Like, you just answer them honestly. Don't, like, I'm not going to tell you what to say. You answer them honestly." And the surgeon said to me, he's like, "Dude, you're like that horse whisperer. You're like the value analysis whisperer." And I immediately started laughing because I'm like, okay. And it was just sort of funny. We would joke about it, but then it sort of stuck, and we ended up getting the product approved because I knew what I was doing. But I was very much specific that we were going to do this my way because I knew how to do it, and I knew he didn't. Right? And he made that joke, and you become such close friends with your customers, particularly in that space, that they can joke at you. And he was actually complimenting me, and so that's how it started. I just took an orth. Look, I believe small med device companies, of which I was working, I believe small med device companies are the engine for innovation in med device. They're the ones that bring better technology that brings better outcomes for patients, makes doctors and nurses happier, lowers cost. I totally believe it. I've seen too much of it not to believe it. The big companies are the big strategics. And the reason they're called that is because they're strategic. They're not innovative. They'll buy innovation, right? But they're not, and that's cool. That's not a shot. But I believe this. But I also believe, and I was seeing it early on for certain reasons where I lived. We had a couple of health systems that really sort of adopted value analysis as we know it today, long before other places did. So I had to become adept at it quickly, and I was fortunate I was able to by drawing on some previous training and just, frankly, just going into these people and saying, what do you want? What do you need? Tell me what you need because I'll get it for you. And that's how it started. But I believe the ground has shifted under our feet in healthcare. And if you're a small med device company, you can still succeed. You just have to prepare for some things or attack some things differently. And that's what I've been doing for a long time. And I knew there was a need for it. I didn't realize there was a demand for it, if that makes sense. But yeah, that's how I got that nickname. Sorry.
I mean, that's a great story. I mean, what better can happen to oneself to get basically get the holy shrine of mastering value analysis committees from one of your customers who you helped get the product he wanted for his patients. In terms of, you mentioned that the value analysis committee is a phenomena which has developed over time. Yeah, you mentioned a few first health systems adopting it. Maybe they didn't even call it that way back then. Right. What would you say? How widely adopted is it nowadays in health systems across the country?
Well, I think it's pretty much the standard these days. If you're talking about hospitals and health systems, and the part where I get some pushback, where, frankly, the people who push back are wrong, is ambulatory surgery centers. They don't call it value analysis, but the process is the same. They want to buy the best products at the lowest possible price that gives them the best outcomes, like all of them. And by the way, it's exactly how you buy a car or how I buy a house it's the same stuff, but it's big decisions for these places. So what's driven it across the country, in the United States at least, is two things. Massive consolidation of health systems. We see, on average, still 5 to 6 health systems a month merging across the United States. You become bigger buying entities. It gets more complex. Decisions that used to be made in your building are now made in a building across town, or in some cases in a different state, right? There are more administrators, and so people think they must be the enemy because they don't, how could they possibly understand? And then the acquisition of doctors' practices, something like 70%, you see a couple different numbers, you see somewhere around 75% of all doctors are now employees of health systems. And it may shift away from that. I don't know. I can't predict the future, but here's what I know. Doctors used to be the champion who got what he or she wanted. Now they not only don't have the power to do that in most cases, many of them don't even know how to do it. And because they're now employed in this big entity. And so and that's really been the past 10 years, hyper the last 7 years. So you'll have reps who say, I've got great products, I've got this great thing. Doctors want it, but we can't get it approved. And that's what everybody struggles with. And I'm not saying it's easy, but it's not as difficult as people think. And that's kind of what I write about for the most part, and have some domain expertise in, because it's really, I estimate that if you're a small med device company, let's say less than 100 million, you're leaving 25% of top line revenue just stalled in the waiting room, not getting approved. And every day that goes by, it gets less likely to get approved, not more. So that's a lot of revenue.
Time kills deals, right? I mean, if it's you lose the interest of your champion, things take longer. You have people change on both sides, on your sales team, on the customer side, so getting things moving faster is just super crucial. Maybe for you already mentioned those innovators, MedTech startups, smaller medical device companies who maybe are encountering a value analysis committee for the first time. So two questions. First of all, how would you define a value analysis committee? Who's usually on it? And what's usually the role in the overall decision-making process? Is it the central decision-making power, or is it an advisor to other institutions?
Yeah. So if you think about it, if you and I dropped into a standard health system in the United States as 10 hospitals, 3 ambulatory surgery centers, and they're headquartered in Norfolk, Virginia, for argument's sake, right? The people that are involved in the monthly value analysis conversations tend to be supply chain, the VP of the service line of that specific service line. Could be emergency department, could be orthopedics, whatever. Risk management is there. Education is there. The C-suite has a seat, but they're not really there that much unless needed. Unless we're going to buy 3 robots, right? And the proposal is, hey, let's buy 3 Da Vinci robots for this hospital. The CFO is absolutely involved, and the C-suite is involved in that. But by and large, that's not their role, but finance will be involved. I'm trying to think if I've missed any of the other major, infection prevention has a role at it. And it's sort of these multifactorial committees whose job it is to either weigh in. So, hey, if we buy 3 robots, can we afford it, finance, right? Does it improve? Does it attract more patients in strategy? That's your C-suite a lot of times, or at least your VP. Are we at risk contractually to have violated a contract with another competitor if we buy these guys? That's like, and then is there any litigation concerns that increase now that we've launched this program? Are our surgeons trained and certified and blah, and there's risk management, right? It's complicated. And And so you don't have to win all these people over, but the less you have on board, less departments you have on board or not having a role in it, the harder it is to get it approved. So those are the people. At an ASC, it's the administrator, it's the business manager, and it's the director of nursing, and then maybe the board or a surgeon. It's much smaller, but if you think they're not sitting there doing the risk assessment and making sure revenue integrity, making sure that like they get paid, and what are we paying for this thing, and then what are we getting reimbursed for it? Like, they need these things. These health systems are enormous business entities. Like, and that's what I think people in our business have tended to struggle with is, well, yeah, but the doctor likes it. I would say, okay, but the doctors are like chefs in 3-star Michelin restaurants. They're brilliant. They know the best ingredients. But most of them don't run the restaurant because most of them don't understand business. Because if they do, that wonderful restaurant is out of business in 9 months. So there's a business side that we have to be involved with to help them understand and answer questions to these other departments that can weigh in, even if it's not directly, like what would a total ankle, why would risk analysis need to be involved? I would say, well, I don't know if they do or not, but I'm going to try to go find out because I know their veto kills the deal. And I need to find out, right? Like, and as you do this a couple times, you start to learn, oh, they do appeal, or this is a concern they're going to want to know. I know the answer to that. I can get them that question answered before they even ask it because I know they're, So those are the people that are on these committees. Many of them, at least half of them, are not clinicians. They don't know an ankle from a shoulder other than they've got 2 of them, right? So, but what do you think they want to know? They want to know what's the return on investment? What are the economics? Are we upside down on this? Are we making money on this? The same stuff you and I want to know when we buy a car. Hey, in 5 years, well, what's it cost me now with my insurance rates? When I go to sell this in 6 years, what's the resale value? We do it all the time. Same thing. Yeah.
I mean, from what you've told me, now digesting that maybe a little bit naively, I would say if I would be in the position of encountering a value analysis committee, I would try to put myself in the shoes of every participant in that committee, and then trying to find out, okay, risk, what are their interests, what do they need to know, and then basically preparing digestible information bits for each participant so that every one of them can pick together the information they need and then more easily do their job and then make life easier for them and then have a higher likelihood of them endorsing the product. I mean, that would be from your master class I just got.
We need to transplant your attitude into a lot of people because, Paul-Lukas, you don't have the track record, the history of having done this for 25 years where if Dr. Hoffschmidt liked my product, he got what he wanted. Like, so we're like, yeah, cool. All I have to do is convince the surgeon or the doctor or the director of nursing, and it's go time. Well, now it's actually start time. Like, that's it. We just start there. And what you described is what I pitch, which is go talk to some of these people, find out what they need. Because if you don't know, you'll slow your deal down. You'll decrease the chances of getting it approved. And the funny thing is, here's the cheat code that I tell everybody, because people that actually make the decisions on your product are the VPs and directors of that service line, generally speaking. If they buy in, they're the ones who become your champion. They're the ones who know how to sell into the value analysis committee because they're on the committee, and they come in and say, because here's what most of them say to me. Hey, send me this thing and I need this. Do you have anything that says this about blah, blah? And I'll say no or yes. And they're like, okay, that's fine. I have everything I need to get this approved. Oh, by the way, can you then send me your VAC pack? Like, it's a totally reverse process where so many companies are like, well, I sent them my VAC pack. I thought it had everything they needed. You're like, dude, do you think people actually read that? Like, you think that gets you on the agenda? Come on. Like, it's like sending a resume to Medtronic as a 23-year-old and going, I sent them a resume. I hope they interview me. You're like, no chance. Nobody gets a job in a business that way. Nobody does. Oh, that's what they fall back on and think, well, my doctor said she wants it. We submitted the VAC pack and we haven't heard anything in 8 months. Okay. You have the right approach. Find out what matters to them. Ask them. Put yourself in their shoes. That's why you could sell today in value analysis. Because most people don't want to do that. They haven't had to do that in the past. The younger ones tend to get it because they're like, I don't have these preconceived notions.
Yeah, understood.
Make sense?
I mean, now we talked a little bit about the do's, what to do to win the value analysis committee. Maybe doing it the other way around, what would we say are the top 3 things sales reps should not do in those meetings, or the things that typical things sales reps do which lead them to not win in the value analysis committee?
Number 1, stop relying on your doctor to be a champion. Number 2, stop relying on your doctor to be a champion. And number 3, stop relying on your doctor to be a champion. Because they're not trained to do this. They don't know most of them don't know what to do. And all you're going to end up doing is frustrate them. What I would say is get a doctor interested. And then once that occurs, you have to make a business case. And a business case is simple to do most of the time. I have companies that call me all the time. We sell some of their products. They hire me to help them. Invariably, they have a great business case, but I don't hear them making it. What do you cost? What's the improvement? Those are the things you have to do. And it's not hard, but it's required. And but stop relying on doctors to be, if you play football, there's a lead blocker. Too many times, med device is tucked in behind the big, heavy hitter and let him be the lead blocker. We have to be the lead blocker. I'm blocking for them. They'll do what I ask them to because they'll see they don't need to do as much work. I'll make it easy for them. That's what we have to do. So how is that for a snappy 3 things not to do?
I mean, it's quite interesting because you still need the interest of a physician.
Yeah.
It's like it's a necessary condition, but it's not sufficient. Yeah, it's basically your entry ticket into that world. He can open the door, but then you have to work with him to then, actually win all the other check marks you have to go through. Yeah,
it's almost the value analysis teams have, and I've interviewed over 50 of these people. Some on my podcast, some separately, right? Just to ask them. And here's what they all say. We don't want to look at something if our doctors don't want it. But then the second question they say is, okay, you got somebody who likes it. Who else wants it? Who else will use it? And if you only have one, they're kind of like, we don't really care about one-offs because they're not a little tiny hospital in Camp Hill, Pennsylvania. They are a sophisticated health system that averages $4 billion in purchasing a year. Like they're like Home Depot. They're not like mom and pop hardware store, right? So they want, you have multiple doctors who are interested? Okay, tell us more. So this is what's so hard for reps, is we were all trained, talk doctor, talk clinical, and we're really good at it. And then some of us learned, hey, talk business to clinical and clinical to business. So you could sort of teach the business people why the clinical benefit was. And now I've added to it. It's talk business to clinical and clinical to business, but talk clinical to clinical, which is what you were describing. You still have to be really good at it, but you have to talk business to business. And that's like this third or fourth quadrant that is difficult. And I spend all my time trying to explain some of it on LinkedIn so people can learn some of the stuff. They're more comfortable because it's not complicated, but if you don't do it, your small med device company will struggle to gain traction. And, frankly, you heard what I believe. I believe they're the engine that drives the innovation in healthcare. What your audience, who's mostly small med device companies, is doing makes my surgery in 10 years better, safer, faster, right? Like, no doubt about it. And I want that to win. And frankly, so do the health systems and ASCs, but we need to talk their language. We just need to.
Yeah.
Simple question. Can you afford to have a rep in every county, or do you need to be hyper-targeted in your outreach? Do you need to know information about your targets going in to be successful, or do you have years and years before you want to close that deal? If you want to be focused, if you want to deliver fast, you should visit alphasophia.com and help your sales team out.
What's your typical process when you're working with you've basically found a new surgeon, he's interested in a device and let's say an implant, and you've never worked with the health system before, it's completely new to you. How do you do research to first of all find out who's on that committee, who are the key decision makers within there, who are the ones who are more dominant in the discussion, less dominant, and so on? Do you talk to the physician and try to find that out? What's the process?
Yes, those are good questions. So I'm going to take it out of the operating room to show people this has application everywhere, right? If you call on the NICU, the neonatology intensive care unit, right, and you talk to a clinician in NICU who says, hey, I really like this warming feature, or I had a disposable laryngoscope that I sold into 100 NICUs a couple years ago. It seemed like every NICU on the planet wanted them. So there was a clinician who wanted it. And the first thing we did was, she's like, I get it. We need this. And I said, because I didn't really know. I didn't know NICUs that one. I'm like, why? Like, I know I got a cool product. Why do you like it so much? And she said, Joint Commission has this. We have to send our current ones downstairs to sterile processing. She's like, describe this whole process. And she's like, and then they come back. It was like, and these are the smallest little 2-pound babies on the planet, right? Like and she was saying, and then we'll get something that we can't see, and I can't get an airway in them, and the kid might die. And you're like, oh my gosh. She described this problem. And it wasn't just, hey, I'd like to be able to see better. She described the workload. Joint Commission is involved. The Department of Health was like, you're now talking about risk management. You're talking about these sort of, and she said, we'll be out of compliance in a year if we don't start looking at all of this stuff. She happened to be very knowledgeable. Those are the types of things, if I know my product and I get a clinician interested, I'll say, okay, listen, here's the other benefits we tend to hear. This helps with compliance or infection prevention or this. Who are the other people that you know of around here that would understand this that I could go talk to? And under no circumstances are you to request we get this product. I will not let them do it because I'm like, I need to gather a bunch of information because I'm going to create a strategic case, which means not only does this help the NICU, it helps sterile processing, it helps infection prevention, it helps risk management because I understand these things because she explained it. Plus, I'm going to show spending $16 on this saves you $35 every time because of the costs that you're using to transport, decontaminate, rewash, sterilize, and bring back up and losing all over the place. Now, you'll notice at no point, so if I brought this to Dr. Paul, and let's say either VP of the service line, NICU service line, you go like, huh. So our doctors like it because it's better, saves us all this time, it actually might save us a couple of bucks. At no point did I go, and little babies' lives are in jeopardy, right? We know that. But if I start saying stuff like that, I sound like a drama queen. I sound like I'm scare selling. But he's like, oh my gosh, yeah, well, we need to get this approved. What you say that price is? And I'm like, here's it. I've estimated this is how many you'll use a year. You're probably spending this much now. This is what you spend on me. And they're like, yeah, we need to do this. Okay, send me that backpack thing you have because I'm going to go get this approved. That's the process. But you'll notice, like, it's like there's a lot of work up front before anybody gets involved. And I want to go to that VP knowing your doctors are interested. Here's the problem. And then all we talk about is the problem. You're spending $40 per intubation. You probably didn't know it, but you're spending it because it's in workflow and man hours. And you start building a case. Guys like you, I could put it in front of you, Paul, and you go, please, like every NICU in America is probably doing this, right? Because it's so logical. Yeah. And it's not because, but the doctor thinks it's better. When that doesn't win in sophisticated buying entities like Kaiser Permanente, UPMC. They care about patients, but they also want to know, well, okay, what are we spending to take care of these patients? And what workflow does it save? What risk does it save us from being? Well, a lot. But if I don't know that language, that's how you do it. You start with somebody smart, and then you got to go ask other people questions. You have to. And I'm the one who ends up, for a lot of people, these companies come to us, I help them write those questions out. And then they go find them out, and they're like, oh my gosh, we really do have a valuable product. I'm like, yeah, I know. But you weren't describing it that way, right? That's why, like, these companies, the craziest great stuff, but they're not describing it in a way that these new decision makers can comprehend. And so, yeah, hopefully that answered. I know it was a little long-winded, but it's a complex process, you know?
Yeah.
And if I just said to that NICU person, hey, you got it, let's request it.
Yeah.
We got a 1 in 5 chance of succeeding. You do that other work, and you put it all together, and you report back to that woman, this neonatologist, here's what I found. You're actually spending this much. She'll be like, really? I make sense. Wow. Now I've been explaining business to clinical, and she's like, I'm taking this to my chief. He's going to want to see this. That's how you get it going. And the chief, who's the VP, then you're off to the races. But you got to do that work, and you have to know what the health system values, and the best way to do it is to do exactly what you said. Just put yourself in their shoes. And if you don't know, go ask them. Yeah, that's what you have to do.
It's like you have to really go deep into the system, yeah, and understand every stakeholder and it's probably also advice for medical device startups, yeah, who often have the question, do I want to start approaching, 10 systems at a time, or do I rather focus on 3 in the beginning and really try to win them by doing all the work, going the extra mile? And from what you're describing, it's probably better going deep before you go wide, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. I hadn't really thought about it that way. I would say, because these processes, even if you nail it, right, the process is still going to take 3 to 6 months, best case. Sometimes faster, depends on how much pain they feel from the problem you're describing. So the problem in that NICU wasn't that the doctor wanted it's easier to see. The problem was you're spending so much money, and you're at jeopardy for a joint commission citation because you're not following the new guidelines, right? That they were like, we must make this happen now because we're at risk of getting dinged. And so that's all we talked about. But the fastest you're going to get done is 90 days, and more likely it's now taking 12 months, 18 months. So I do think you need multiple lines in the water, but you need to have like your first 3 steps, which are, let's say, get a doctor interested, and then should I go to other doctors before I go to somebody up the food chain, like somebody who's got a boot in the business and clinical camp? So I think you can do both, but know that you have to do multiple steps, and you probably can't skip steps. Yeah. You just can't. So I would be time permitting, but I would not let those first 3 that you described that I go to, I would not let them sit where I need to get them something and they're waiting on me. So I think you're sort of limited by your bandwidth. But does that help? I don't know if I answered your question.
No, I fully understand. I mean, in the end, it's always, in an ideal world, you try to do both, but often, especially for smaller organizations, there's some level of resource constraint, where they just only have so many people at a given time to show the next proof points, to then maybe get further funding or scale up the organization. But fully agree with you. Maybe on a higher level, what are other exciting trends you're currently seeing or foreseeing in medical device sales currently going on?
Yeah, it's I don't know how fascinating it is to everyone, but I think there's a lot of talent in med device sales that's been sidelined the last 6 months, or not necessarily sidelined, but sort of checking boxes, but not very not very excited about what's going on because their average sale price has been driven down. Their companies are sort of, there's a lot of really talented people already in hospitals, already in ambulatory surgery centers who have great relationships. You could fly in and land in, Nashville, Tennessee. And if you knew a couple of people, they could walk right into any hospital in Nashville, Tennessee today, right? And that cuts the time considerably, but they're not, these people are not excited about what they're selling. The companies are sort of becoming massive conglomerates, and I think there's never been a time where there's more talent looking for something interesting and new and innovative to sell for small med device companies. And it seems, I just notice it. I have so many friends that used to be like hitting on all 12 cylinders who were sort of like idling in 6 cylinders and just sort of like, yeah, man, I'm fine. Like the upside isn't so big and the downside's not so. And I think there's a market of really good people to tap into for small companies if they can help these reps who have not been trained to get products approved, get their products approved. Because that's the hurdle. They're like, yeah, how am I going to get that new thing that Paul-Lukas called me about? How am I going to get his product approved here? Like, I don't even know. I can barely get my cool new products approved. So like that's sort of, somebody's going to figure it out because there are a lot of very talented people with tremendous relationships in the hospitals that aren't getting leveraged, it seems like, to me. I don't know, is that, like, what do you see? What do you see that's jumping out?
That's a really interesting thought I haven't heard.
Really?
And it totally makes, no, actually, I mean, I think it's, I mean, from what you're saying, I think it's also a general phenomena in the economy at the moment, where there's great talent which is sometimes not employed at the company or working on the problem where their talent could be used the most. I mean, medical device is a relationships game, so having those relationships sitting on ice is a little bit of a waste, yeah. But that's a really good point, and especially for smaller organizations who maybe only have one VP of sales just hired who's trying to scale their team. I think that can be good news to have this job market where they can potentially quickly hire very very talented people.
I do think I think it's deeper than I've ever seen. Like there's always a general, like no matter the industry you and I are in, there's always going to be a little bit of that somewhere. It just seems that I've noticed it more sort of going into COVID and then during and post-COVID, it seems 8x, 9x. And I just think there's so many talented people out there that are, here, I'll profile for a second. 47-year-old rep who's been with a big company for 10 years, maybe 15 years, knows everybody in the building, knows everybody in all the buildings, and it's just kind of going through the motions because it's boring, can't get his new things that his company has, yet could like walk yours in and get it in front of all the people like that. There seem to me to be more of those people than I've ever noticed. Now, maybe it's because those folks are my contemporaries, right? So I'm just noticing it more, but I don't think so. And there's so much horsepower. And I will tell you, my organization has a couple guys who are, let's say, past Medicare, who are some of the best med device salespeople I've ever seen. And they work because they like to sell. And like I'm watching 68-year-olds move the needle, and I'm thinking like, look at those guys. There's a lot of people out here like that, that like it, that like being in the business, that like being around doctors and nurses. Like we all kind of like it. And so I do think it's a unique opportunity there for a lot of these smaller companies that you interact with all the time. They're the ones who are calling you about Alpha Sophia, trying to figure out where these customers are, what they look like, and so I'm curious to hear what you see over the next couple of years.
Yeah, I mean, it's a completely different thing, but what I'm seeing, especially with digital health, which is a little bit like an emerging category over the course of the last couple of years. And digital health is an interesting category because sometimes it's a little bit like medical device. They often do have devices coupled with software, or only software as a medical device. But the interesting thing is their process in selling is often a bit more comparable to pharma, because often they are more marketing driven, more driven to reach a wider prescriber audience for their software as a medical device, for example. And then, of course, they're competing on with pharma budgets on those attention of busy doctors. And I think it's going to be interesting how that's going to play out, how they fit their niche in marketing and selling in that industry. So that's something I'm currently looking at a lot and thinking about how those companies which are built a little bit like medical device but have a different marketing and sales motion, how they can enter the market in an efficient way to bring their innovative solutions to market.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I don't know if have you talked to I don't know if you have Bill Hunter from Canary Medical.
Not
yet. Yeah, he's the guy who's created like it's a digital knee implant. Zimmer licensed it, and it's giving 24-hour feedback, every 24 hours currently, on range of motion post knee, total knee. And I think the guy's a wizard. Like I can listen to him talk about this, and he's sort of at that cross pollination of orthopedic sales, implant sales, and digital health. And his journey has been fascinating, but you're right, like digital health is fascinating. I boil back down to, regardless of the robotic, navigation, image guided, AI driven, whatever, it doesn't to me matter. It's how you're going to get in front, because I'm a salesperson, that's just sort of your default. Yeah. Like, how do you get in front of the decision makers and who are they? And to quote you, like, how can you stand in their shoes and understand what they deal with? And, but that's what I just had this conversation with a really good long-time med device implant rep, runs a nice business, and he's like right out of what I just described a while ago. I was like, hey, you should be looking at some of this software here and this, because you're good at selling. You just need to get a little uncomfortable selling something that's sort of a different sales process. But he's looking at a software which he's never sold before. But trust me, like, this guy can sell software. He just needs somebody to help him a little bit with it, right? And then he'll bring in 10 customers for him overnight. So I just think there's a lot of people like that guy out there that can really move the needle, regardless of whether it's a new laryngoscope, ankle fracture system, or the software, Yeah. I love it.
I agree. Mark, one last closing question. What's going to be your personal focus or professional focus over the course of the next few months?
Well, I have products I got to sell, so every day I got to get up and sell stuff. But as an aside, I'm really trying to drive the education to reps and small med device companies, because that ends up being who listens and reads my stuff. Frankly, at the end of the day, I believe if I do this and educate people, some will hire me to help them, some will just learn from me and get better. Hopefully, that's the goal. We get better products in the hands of our clinicians that helps my parents if they get sick, or you and I if we get sick or injured. So I'm really focusing on the next 90 days of educating more across different platforms, so that people, regardless of whether they call me to help or just do it DIY it, do it themselves, they're better. And the funny thing is, I have value analysis people who shoot me a message on the site saying, please keep doing this. Please keep saying this stuff. It's what we're looking for, which is not something I anticipated, but it's sort of getting that. That's what they want to hear. They want the reps bringing them these things. So I figure if I do that, if I help people, nothing bad has ever happened to me if I help people, and it's usually been beneficial. So I'm really locking in on the next 90 days of fundamental education on sort of the basics of value analysis. Like you said, what the 3 things you should do, what are terms you should understand, What's the language? Who are these people? All those sort of things. And hopefully I help,
Mark,
and thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, Mark, as always, it was very educating, a lot of fun talking to you. Thank you so much for being on the pod, and hopefully I can welcome you back at some point in the future.
Yeah, it'd be great. You know how much I like your product. You know how much I like you guys. And it's not a solicitation. I'm not getting paid for this. I just think you guys are onto something. I think you're helping a lot of small companies.
Thank you very much.
And so we're co-collaborators or co-conspirators. We're both on the same pirate ship, whatever it is.
Thank you, Mark. Have a great day.
Thanks.
Like it or not, you're in a fight for physician attention. And in this fight, you'll want to leverage best-in-class targeting data, 360-degree profiles of every target, omni-channel outreach, and so much more. Great MedTech sales teams don't want to work without Alpha Sophia anymore. Visit us at alphasophia.com and learn more.